Great day, beloved. Great day, great day. We're here. We are, episode 6. We're at episode 6, season 2. So, I thank you for sticking with me. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. Also, if you follow me on Facebook, you can follow me at Stephon D. Henderson on Facebook. That's and I have another page as well, which is Stephon Henderson or The Real Stephon. I'm going to start on Thursday. The 10th. I'm going to start going live for about 20 minutes. So to be Eden Life Live for about 20 minutes, okay? 20 minutes of some spiritual thought. We're gonna go over and dive deep into the 3 pillars of Eden life, which are meditation, manifestation, and metaphysics. Okay, so here we are at season. We're in season 2, episode 6, and today we're gonna go over the plagues. So the plagues begin. So the title of this episode is "The Plagues Begin: Divine Demonstration and Consciousness Transformation." Transformation. So welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Connecting the Source with Rev Stephon, and I am your host, Rev Stephon. And as always, what we want to do is make sure that we have a safe container, that this is sacred space. And we know what we do. We center ourselves. I want you to concentrate in the middle of your forehead, in between your eyebrows. I want you to visualize. Imagine a shining light. And as you breathe, as we get into creating a sacred space, that light will get brighter and brighter. You can imagine it as a bright golden light, a bright orange light, bright purple light, or a shining orb. Whatever works for you, okay? So I want you to relax, close your eyes, see that shining light in the middle of your forehead. That is your pineal gland. Begin to breathe in, deep breath, hold it, breathe out slowly, breathe in. And remember, as we breathe in, we are breathing in good stuff, right? We're breathing in positive energy. We're breathing in constructive energy, creative energy. And as we breathe out, we are breathing out all the negativity, all the negative thoughts, is stinking thinking, those things that don't serve you. Breathe in, breathe out, deep breath in, breathe out. And every time you breathe out, see that light, see that orb, see that light in the middle of your forehead go brighter and brighter, brighter and brighter. Breathe in, out, deep breath in, shining light, bright. Breathe out. So today, we explore the beginning of the plagues of Egypt and their profound metaphysical meaning in our spiritual transformation journey. Remember, this is a journey. This is a process, okay? Trust the process. So, well, again, this season, we're adding more context, both scriptural context, historical context, cultural context. So in this context, the scripture in Exodus 7 and 8, we witnessed the first 4 plagues: water to blood, frogs, lice, and flies. These weren't just punishments, but progressive demonstrations of divine power and the systematic breakdown of limiting consciousness. Remember, Egypt consciousness is limiting consciousness. It is not growth consciousness. Okay, Egypt consciousness keeps you bound. It keeps you from your divine purpose and potential. Okay, so as we witness these plagues, remember that these are progressive demonstrations of divine power and the systematic breakdown of limiting consciousness. So it is a process as well, because you didn't develop these limitations or this limitation consciousness, this Egypt consciousness overnight. Okay, it's because of various influences. Okay, cultural influences, community influences, religious influences, family influences, uh, and others. So this is a systematic process of breaking down this limiting consciousness. So each one of these plagues represents stages. Okay, stages. So what is the historical context? The historical context, uh, the Egyptian religious systems as it relates to these plagues. So these plagues are an affront or a direct attack on the Egyptian religious system and their various gods. Remember, for the Hebrews, there is only one God, and that one God reigns supreme. And so, but there are a pantheon. There is multiple gods that are represented in the Egyptian religious system. So these plagues are an affront to each one of those gods. Is a breakdown of that religious system. But for us spiritually, it is, remember, a breakdown of limiting consciousness. So Hape, Hapi, Hape is the Nile god. Okay, it is challenged by the first plague. Then we have Heket, Heqet, Heket, which is the frog goddess, which is challenged by the second plague. And Geb, Geb, the earth god, is challenged by the third plague. And Khepri, Khepri, is the manifestation deity. It is challenged by the fourth plague. Okay, so these deities represented the foundation of Egyptian religious consciousness and societal structure. So challenging them was not merely a physical disruption, but an ontological crisis, right? Their whole system, their whole religious system. Okay, that their religious system also was deeply a part of their cultural existence. So this is dismantling the very framework of reality as understood by the Egyptians. Okay, and remember we touched upon it before that the Nile is significant. The Nile River is life. Okay, it is the lifeblood of Egyptian culture. So the Nile River is central to the Egyptian identity and mythology. There's annual inundation created agricultural fertility. So, this is how they survived. And then transportation, the transportation and commerce depended upon the Nile River. And then also the rituals and priesthoods dedicated to its worship. So there was religious rituals that were essential when it came to the Nile. There were sacrifices made. Okay. So the timing of the first plague likely coincided with the annual inundation or the flooding period. Okay, inundation is the flooding period. So the timing of the first plague likely coincided with this annual flooding period, when the Nile normally turned reddish with silt. Okay, silt, right? The earth, that rich earth under the water, it's silt. But this transformation was different. This was something that was normal. Remember we talked about the burning bush? There was nothing abnormal about a bush burning in a desert place, but what was abnormal or extraordinary was that it was burning but was not consumed. Okay, so there was really, because of this annual flood, there was really nothing out of the ordinary with the water turning, a reddish hue. But however, this transformation was different in magnitude and duration. disrupting the natural cycle that the Egyptians depended upon. So they were used to it, but they also were used to it at a certain level and a certain length of time. Okay. So this, because it was scheduled, right? It was part of the calendar, or if you will, then this disrupted their normal routine. Okay. What are some of the other scriptural connections? So, Exodus 7, 4 through 8:32 is as our primary text. Water to blood connections with birth imagery. Okay, remember, as you know, there is a discharge of blood and tissue during natural childbirth, and it also the Nile represents birth, but then uh, figuratively and symbolically, remember, this is the birth period of Moses, because he is taking from the Nile. Okay. Uh, then this was the creation pattern that it is reversed. So creation now is reversed. Genesis 1 provided the creating order. The plagues created disorder in a false system. Okay, for the Hebrews, these deities, these was a false system. Right? Remember, they were separated in Goshen, so they had an opportunity, what they in their limited memory from the patriarch Joseph, of worshiping God, and then so now God is sending his representative Moses so that the Hebrews can leave that place, Goshen, and come to the mountain to worship him in spirit and in truth. So these plagues, especially the first one, created a reversal in system, the creating order. Again, there is in creation, especially when we talk about creating people, babies, birth. There is what a water breaking. Okay, and it's the is also a progressive revelation pattern throughout the scripture. That this progression, right, of the revelation, of a realization of who we are, and in terms of whose we are, right? But also this revelation that we are also divine. Okay, so let's get into understanding the plagues as transformation. So these divine demonstrations are, rather than punishment. So these plagues represent a systematic revelation of truth rather than arbitrary punishment, right? So the Egyptians, of course, felt that these were punishments, but in reality, this is a dismantling of a false belief, and then a revelation of a true belief. Okay, they follow a specific order designed to dismantle limitation consciousness, piece by piece, and it's this progressive nature of transformation. So that was the divine demonstration, which is a divine demonstration rather than punishment. The progressive nature. There's a progressive nature of transformation. Each plague builds upon the previous one, showing how spiritual awakening occurs in stages rather than instantaneous changes. We mentioned that earlier, right? Spiritual awakening, it happens in stages. There's a process rather than an instantaneous change. This progressive revelation accommodates consciousness development. Okay, so there is a different stages of consciousness require a period or periods of development. Okay, so these Egyptian gods again are being challenged. Each plague specifically targeted an Egyptian deity or a sacred element, demonstrating the systemic dismantling of false belief systems. This represents how spiritual truth confronts limiting beliefs directly. So spiritual truth, it challenges, right, limiting beliefs directly. Okay. And then remember that God hardened Pharaoh's heart so that it would not be easy, that there would not be this instantaneous change, but because of the hardened heart, then there was this progression, right? This progressions of challenging this limiting beliefs as represented by Pharaoh's hardened heart. Okay. So Pharaoh's increasing resistance reflects how entrenchment often occurs before breakthrough. We're entrenched in belief. We see it in playing out in this country. There are people whose belief they are entrenched in this belief that this current person in the White House, this current administration, is anything other than what and who he truly is. That they believe that some of them align him to Christ or other biblical figures. That he is doing something, for others other than for himself. That he is actually doing good for the country rather than destroying it. So this is an entrenched belief. So Pharaoh's increasing resistance reflects how entrenchment often occurs before breakthrough. So what am I saying? That, just stay the course. It's going to be a long ride. And it's before these entrenched beliefs succumb to spiritual breakthrough. This hardening process reveals how limiting consciousness fights hardest just before transformation. Right? There is going to be pushback. It's going to be, they're going to fight even harder. First of all, they're not ones who admit, like he's not one to admit failure or admit that they were wrong. Okay. So the first plague was water to blood. The Nile, as life source. So remember the Nile is the life source of Egypt. The river represented sustenance, fertility, and the entire economic system. It was worshipped as divine and considered the bloodstream of Osiris. Okay, the Nile was considered the bloodstream of Osiris. So this water consciousness. So now this water consciousness is being transformed. This transformation of the fundamental element of consciousness, water, represents how spiritual awakening begins by disrupting our most basic assumptions about reality. I'm going to repeat that. So this transformation of the fundamental element of consciousness, represented by water, right, represents how spiritual awakening begins by disrupting our most basic assumptions about reality. That sound familiar? Okay. And so remember that this inundation and this flooding that brought, this change in the color of the water would happen annually, but this was different because it was more intense and it lasted longer. So the 7 days of duration, this complete cycle, 7 means completion. Remember, the complete cycle of transformation needed. This is the complete cycle of transformation needed for deep change to take root in consciousness. 7 represents completion of a spiritual cycle. Okay, 7 represents completion of a spiritual cycle. Now, and the Egyptians, had magicians and others, and so the Egyptian magicians replicating but not reversing the effect. So they replicated the effect of changing water into blood or this deep red, but they did not reverse what was happening, or could not reverse what was happening with the Nile itself. So it shows how limited consciousness can mimic truth, but cannot restore harmony once disruption begins. So limited consciousness can mimic truth, but cannot restore harmony once disruption begins. This represents the difference between manipulation and true transformation, right? The magicians are able to manipulate but they're not able to transform. So the second through the fourth plagues were this increasing demonstration. Frogs, the fertility goddess Heket challenge. This is the fertility goddess Heket challenge. This represents suppressed emotions and subconscious patterns coming to the surface where they can no longer be ignored. So these suppressed emotions, this the subconscious consciousness pattern. So the subconscious is the really what rules us. So we move through conscious thought. We are consciously aware, but it is our subconscious thoughts that actually influence us. Okay, right. So um, this these gods, these frogs, is in a direct affront to the fertility goddess Heket. And it represents suppressed emotions and subconscious patterns coming to the surface where they can no longer be ignored. All right. The lice and the gnats, that plague of lice and gnats, this is in a direct affront to Geb, which is the earth god. This is a challenge to Geb, the earth god. This represents how transformation reaches into the smallest details of daily life and thought patterns, affecting the very dust of our being. Right. So the dust was disrupted, and flies and lice and gnats, just inundated the air. Okay. So, but both lice and gnats, are very small. But if you've been around in a swarm of gnats, then you know how irritating, right? Even though they're small, they irritate you. Okay. So this represents how transformation reaches into the smallest details of daily life. And so then also the flies, right? The flies, came. They laid maggots into some of the death of the livestock, and so the flies were everywhere. This was a direct affront to Kepri, right? Kepri. I hope that I'm pronouncing it right. Khepri, Kepri, which is the manifestation demon, the direct affront. This shows how uncontrolled manifestation occurs when consciousness is in transformation, with unwanted creations appearing everywhere. Okay, so this is when uncontrolled manifestation, when things just pop up, things happen in your life. These things pop up in your life. This is when consciousness is in transition. And when the consciousness is in transition, unwanted creations appear everywhere. Okay, and so then there is this separation happening in Goshen. All these plagues are happening in Egypt, right? But they're not affecting what's going on in the daily life of the Hebrews in Goshen. So the separation of Goshen. This is the beginning with the fourth plague. The Israelites were protected. This represents how developing spiritual consciousness begins to create a protected space, a sacred space within. Okay, a safe container. Even while transformation continues, it's sort of like the chrysalis during the transformation of the caterpillar into a butterfly. So it is a protective space while this transformation continues. Okay. All right. So how do we make this practical? How do we make this lesson practical? So we have this water to blood meditation. I want to identify the fundamental assumptions that are being transformed. These fundamental assumptions that we have about our lives. These fundamental assumptions that keep us in a Egyptian consciousness, a consciousness of limitation. Okay, so this water to blood meditation. Doing this meditation, we want to identify these fundamental assumptions, these things that we assume to be true, these false beliefs, these things that keep us bound. as we're beginning our spiritual transformation. Okay, so then we want to, and remember we talked about how the gnats and the lice, or these things, these things, or these subconscious things, right? These things that need to be brought to the surface, right? So we want to work consciously with emerging feelings and these subconscious patterns. Be conscious of the things that were submerged into our unconscious that are now beginning, to be stirred up, right? You will be able to work with them consciously, work with and recognize and work with the feelings and these subconscious patterns that have had us in this and locked into these limiting beliefs. Okay. And notice how spiritual change affects the smallest aspects of life. We begin to see things differently. We begin to react differently. Certain things don't affect us the same way. These things that used to push our buttons, okay? The people who used to push our buttons, okay? We begin to notice that they don't affect us the same way. Right, because of our spiritual change, our change, this transformation, this spiritual transformation. So and it begins to affect the smallest aspects, the things that we didn't realize. Being being conscious, or being aware of our surroundings. Just being present in the day. It begins to affect even the smallest aspects. And then we want to, in this transformation, remember, it's creating this Goshen consciousness. It is establishing a protected awareness during this transformation. We now are creating this Goshen consciousness, knowing that while we're in the midst of this transformation, that we are protected, that what's going on in the world, what's going on outside of us, as we are perfecting, as we are transforming, we are in protected space. We are in sacred space. We are in a safe container. Okay? We are in a safe container. All right. So as we end this episode, we want to end this episode with a brief meditation. We are still in sacred space. We are still in Goshen consciousness. We are in a protected space, right? A safe container. So close your eyes, breathe in, breathe out, deep breath, that baby breathe, deep breath. Feel your diaphragm. Breathe in, hold it, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. See that shining orb getting brighter and brighter. Feel and know that you're in protected space. Breathe in, breathe out. Center into transformation consciousness. Breathe in, breathe out. Feel the divine demonstrations in your life. Breathe in, breathe out. Notice where limiting systems are being challenged. Breathe in, breathe out. Allow the progressive revelation of truth. Breathe in, hold it, breathe out slowly. And remember, for this week, notice where water to blood transformation is occurring in your basic assumptions. Observe emotional patterns, right? Emotional patterns, frogs surfacing for recognition. Pay attention to the small details, the lice of consciousness being transformed, and begin creating separation between old and new consciousness. And until next week, remember, divine demonstration precedes perfect order. Transformation follows sacred time. Remember, empower your purpose, embrace your journey, and witness the extraordinary unfold. Peace, love, and light. You are always connecting and connected to Source. Till next week.